Welcome to the Earth Chronicles. Tonight's presentation is on the ancient lands of Sumer and Mesopotamia. Sumer is one of the earliest civilizations known to man. Settlement began around 6500 BC. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers flow through the land, present-day Iraq, giving it the name Fertile Crescent. Sumerian farmers were able to grow an abundance of crops, which facilitated a permanent society. During the 4th millennium BC, Sumer was divided into independent city-states. They were erected around a temple complex dedicated to the god or goddess that protected the city. A priest or priestess, along with the king, governed the people on a day-to-day basis. In the beginning, the temples ruled, and priestesses were in control of the temple. In due time, men took over, starting with the temples and then on to the king's palace. Soon the king shared power with the temple. Eventually, the king usurped all the power as he was backed by a larger army. In today's world, males still run most power structures. This is a dangerous paradigm which needs addressing as it is hurting the fabric of society. Women must be able to return to the natural position as the personification of Mother Earth and an equal partner with men. The story of the fall of man, whereby the woman sinned first, is incorrect, as we will come to see. It is a lethal weapon in the hands of the temple. The Sumerians were among the first astronomers, mapping the stars into sets of constellations, many of which survived in the zodiac and were also recognized by the ancient Greeks. They were aware of the 5 planets that are easily visible to the naked eye. Nonetheless, the chronicles maintains that India was the first to chart the skies in the present cycle of civilization since 10,000 BC. The Izdubar legend, containing the story of the flood and the history of Nimrod, were probably written as early as 2,000 years BC, but refers to events that happened ages before. One cannot write such detailed reports of world-shattering events without time to prepare and do the work. Fragments of the Chaldean historian Berosus, preserved in the works of later writers, have shown that the Babylonians were acquainted with traditions referring to the creation, the period before the flood, the deluge, and other matters forming parts of Genesis. Sumerian religion seems to have been founded upon 2 central myths. The first saw creation as the result of a series of sacred marriages involving the reconciliation of opposites. The second is the belief in many gods. There was no set group or gods that ruled all of the cities. Each city-state had its own temple with priests and priestesses. Nonetheless, they were not exclusive. The gods of one city were gods in the other cities as well. This is similar to the Egyptian system of multiple gods. First, there were primordial beings that created the universe. Before anything existed, there was Tiamat, who was the personification of the abyss of salt water, and her consort Apsu, god of the fresh waters. They commingled together, and their union produced Lamu and Lahamu, who in turn created Anshar and Kishar, who then gave birth to An or Anu. This is very similar to the book of Genesis, where darkness was over the face of the deep. Next, the gods were created. The 3 most important deities in the pantheon were the gods An, Enlil, and Enki. An or Anu represents abstract divinity, and he appears to be the original principle of nature. He is the unmoved mover who moves all. All authority comes from him. Enki is the god of wisdom. He gave humans the arts and sciences, the industries and means of civilization, and the first law book was said to be his creation. He is the son of Anu and Ki. Enlil is the god of storm, wind, and rain. He was the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon and the patron god of Nippur. His consort was Ninlil, the goddess of the south wind. He is the son of An and Ki. Apsu hears rumors that the younger gods are planning on killing him, and they make a lot of noise that bothered him and Tiamat as well. Hence, Apsu plans on killing them. When he tells Tiamat of his plans, she goes into a rage. Nonetheless, Apsu still wants to kill them. Anki ends up drugging Apsu and killing him. When Tiamat finds out, she goes into another rage and decides to get rid of the younger gods once and for all. None of the younger gods had the power to go up against Tiamat, who is a huge fire-breathing dragon. The gods chose Anki's powerful son Marduk to do battle for them. He agrees, but demands to be chief of the gods if he wins. The other gods agree. Marduk fights Tiamat, wins the battle, and becomes the chief god of the pantheon. The creation myth is titled Enuma Elis. It is interesting to note that once again we have different sets of gods that end up fighting one another. The myth resembles the Greek story where Cronus kills his father Uranus and his son Zeus kills him. Why all the killing? This war between the powers of good and evil, chaos and order, is separate from the creation story. It does not correspond with anything in Genesis, but it is a very close replica of the war between Michael and the dragon in Revelations, where the dragon is called the great dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. There are several other myths that dovetail the Bible stories of the creation of the universe, the creation of the earth, the fall of man, original sin, atonement for sin, and the flood story. The story of Inanna going down into Hades to get her consort Dumuzi is almost the same as Demeter's descent into hell to set Persephone free, and there are others. It appears that the stories about the fall of man and the great flood were originally conceived in Sumer, translated and modified in Babylon, and reworked by the Assyrians before they were used by the Hebrew scribes for the versions which appear in our Bible. Something to think about as we proceed is whether there is a male versus female motive running through all these systems, including the Bible. Why is it God the Father and not God the Mother? Why is Santa a man and not a woman? Why was Jesus a man and not a woman? Same with Abraham, Moses, Noah, etc. Why are all these individuals men? Were women left out on purpose? And if so, for what purpose? According to ancient scriptures, men did not have to be faithful to one woman. They could have more than one wife, and sleeping with unmarried women did not count as adultery. Only men who slept with another man's wife could be punished for adultery. But a woman had to be faithful to her husband, and she was expected to be a virgin until she married. And it goes much deeper than this as it relates to property and who will inherit the property, as will be shown in future videos. Most ancient temples had a law that every woman had to come to the temple once a year and offer themselves up to any man that came along and had the money. The money went to the temple. The woman had to stay there until her duty was over, be it an hour, a day, a week, or a month. So the temples were actually brothels. The most important daughter of Anu was Ishtar. She was in some respects the equivalent of the classical Venus. Her worship was at first subordinate to that of Anu, but in time the worship of Ishtar became one of the darkest features in Babylonian mythology. As the worship of this goddess increased in favor, it gradually superseded that of Anu, until in time his temple, the house of heaven, came to be regarded as the temple of Ishtar or Venus. The planet Venus, as the evening star, was identified with Ishtar. The worship of Ishtar became so decadent that it became an all-night orgy, including bestiality and other forms of licentiousness. Human sacrificial blood rituals occurred, with the drinking of menstrual blood of the high priestess to reenact a sacred marriage. Nonetheless, the priestesses were not the only ones at fault. The temple power structure was the culprit, and it was run by the same elite families. Original sin is the coldest altar God ever made. Both Genesis and Enuma Elish are religious texts which detail cultural origins. Genesis describes the origin and founding of the Jewish people, and Enuma Elish recounts the origin and founding of the Mesopotamians. Contained in each work is the story of how the cosmos and man were created. Both accounts describe the watery chaos and primeval darkness that filled the universe. Light is created to replace the darkness. Afterwards, the heavens are made, and in them heavenly bodies are placed. Finally, a man is created. In the Bible, the first man was Adam. In the Enuma Elish, the first man was Lulu, created by E after consultation with Marduk, who now holds the tablets of destiny. With the blood of Tiamat's consort, the first human is made. Both stories revolve around an all-powerful deity who forms order from chaos. In both accounts, humans are expected to worship the deity through service according to his laws. In Mesopotamia, however, humans were created to be co-workers with the gods to help maintain order and to keep the forces of chaos at bay. This is in stark contrast to the Bible, which creates man to worship the Lord of heaven. Nevertheless, there are similarities. Both systems contain a story about a great flood that was sent by God to destroy the earth. In the Bible, Noah is the hero, and in the Enuma Elish, it is Enashpitan. Both patriarchs build an ark and save mankind. The story of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel is also contained in both accounts. In fact, the Sumerian myths predate the Bible, as do the Hindu sacred stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh is a famous work that centers around Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. There are several motifs throughout the work, including immortality, sexuality, and the story of the Great Flood. The epic starts with Gilgamesh taking advantage of the women of Uruk by droit de seigneur, or lord's right, to sleep with brides on their wedding night before their husbands consecrate the marriage. We have seen this same practice in other parts of the world, as discussed in previous videos. Once again, we find sexuality at the center of the story, and not in a pleasant way. The gods send Enkidu, a wild man, to stop Gilgamesh from ravishing the women. They fight, but neither wins, and they end up becoming friends. Ishtar makes advances to Gilgamesh, who laughs at her because of her promiscuity with other men. She has her father Anu send the bull from heaven to attack Gilgamesh, who, with Enkidu, kill the bull and cut it open. Gilgamesh is 2/3 God and 1/3 man, and hence he is undefeatable. He is an earlier version of Hercules and Prometheus. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is so distraught, he goes on the journey to find Utnapishtim, the hero of the flood, to seek the answers to life and immortality. Utnapishtim tells him it is a waste of time for humans to fight their common fate. His immortality was a reward for saving the human race. Thus we see that all systems have similar stories and share the same history. It appears that all myths come from the same source and contain the same truths, which are told in different languages in different nations at different times. As we'll come to see, India, Greece, and many other nations have similar tales and mythologies